What is a warm-up? A warm-up is simply any preparation you do leading into training or competition. At the start of the session, it's good to conduct a warm-up in order to prepare your body for the training or the competition that you're about to do. I found that a lot of people don't know the right way to design or to conduct a warm-up that's both effective and efficient. A lot of time, people will waste a lot of their time overdoing certain aspects of a warm-up, or even underdoing and not warming up at all, going straight into their work sets. Why do we want to do a warm-up? We want to have our body in the best condition we can during our training or competition. And we also want to minimize the risk of any injuries we get during the training or competition as well. We also do it to prepare our joints, our muscles, our nervous system, and our energy system for the training or competition that we're about to do. And that also includes our connective tissue, so ligaments and tendons. There isn't one perfect warm-up out there. And for us, we should look at two main principles we've talked about in the past, and those are specificity and individual differences. In addition, when we're actually doing our warm-up, we should also consider our current condition as well as efficiency. Why is specificity important? In my mind, it's probably the most important thing to consider with a warm-up. We should actually build in specificity, that is moving from a more generalized warm-up into a very specific warm-up linked to that session that we're about to do. Individual differences can also play a very large part. Everyone's anatomy and physiology, as well as their current injury, can be very different. So what one person needs to do to warm up in order to do something like a squat or a bench press, they'll have different mobility factors, different amounts of flexibility. So we need to look at what do you need to do to warm up? And that's really individual. It's not going to be significant or vastly different, but there might be some subtleties you'll need to factor in or spend more time focusing on in order to prepare your body for training. The current condition applies to how you're actually feeling on the day. If you're feeling pretty banged up, if you're pretty fatigued, or if you're pretty tight, you may need to spend more time in a warm-up. And efficiency, we don't want to waste time. I've known people in the past that prior to squatting would foam roll for 30 to 40 minutes. And whilst it might make themselves feel better, it's probably the least efficient way to prepare for actually squatting. And there are a lot better ways to do it. We will generally break our warm-up into two parts. That is a general warm-up and a specific warm-up. The general warm-up, a lot of people will conduct as some basic aerobic training. It might go anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, something like a treadmill, a rower, a stepper, or an air bike. Even though it's still generalized, we should look at, is there something more efficient and more useful I can do with my warm-up? So if I'm going to do an upper body session, does running on a treadmill at a really high pace really help me prepare for bench press? It's probably going to elevate your core temperature, without a doubt, but there's probably something more useful you could do, such as hopping on a C2 rower that actually use your upper body moving through the joints. We'll also look at our mobility for the training we're about to do. We're not looking to increase our overall flexibility in general. That's a different part of training, should be done later on, but we're looking at making sure our body is mobile enough. In reality, we're looking at what our mobility is and what we need it to be to the session we're doing. You might be tight somewhere, such as me, I'm really tight in the shoulders, so prior to squatting, I'll do a bit of work upper body to prepare my shoulders and my arms to be able to lock the bar in behind the back. So our warm-up will start off more generalized in the beginning. We're getting that general warm-up, that is trying to elevate our core temperature to improve blood flow to different parts of our body, as well as moving through mobility of the joints that we're about to actually use in training. But look at what joints and what range of motion are going to be used and making sure we start moving through that. And that'll help grease the groove. The reason why we're doing that is we're trying to lubricate our joints. That is having synovial fluid move over to allow more easy movement when we actually go to do our work sets. Some people will also do some stretching. Generally, you should look at more dynamic style stretching. So don't look for static stretches to hold a joint in place for a long period of time. That's more for building or improving your flexibility in the long term. Probably not the time to be doing it in a warm-up. What you're actually doing by doing those static stretches is you may actually cause some micro trauma in your connective tissue, potentially even your muscles, which can actually lead to an injury during training. We want to avoid that. We don't really want to stretch out our tendons or our muscles too much, that we can actually cause an injury. So just moving dynamically through the range of motion that we're going to do until we get more mobile. We're able to move through the motion more easily. The sort of second part of the warm-up is the specific part. We should now look at replicating the actual exercises or movement we're going to do in our main session and building in intensity towards whatever our working sets are. Now, you don't want to waste time or waste effort by doing too many reps with your warm-up. When it comes to strength training, but all training in reality, you don't want your warm-up to be at the detriment of your actual training. You don't want to increase fatigue during your warm-up. You want to prepare your body, not fatigue your body. Take, for example, we're squatting today. for 3 sets of 5 at 120 kilograms. We don't want our reps to be in excess. So we don't want to do 10 reps at 20, 10 reps at 40, 10 reps at 60, 10 reps at 80, 10 reps at 100, and then do 3 sets of 5 at 120. We might start off with doing a set of 5 at 20, maybe a set of 3 at 40, a set of 2 at 60, a set of 1 at 80, and another set of 1 at 100, and then do a work sets. This will minimize the amount of fatigue we incur with our specific warm-up. Now the same applies to not just strength training, but aerobic training as well as any kind of speed training. We want to gradually build an intensity that's under our working intensity. So don't go all out in your warm-up. It should build in its specificity, moving from being light to gradually getting harder over time, but not at the cost of your actual performance during your training. Now we can still do mobility work during our specific part of the warm-up. When I'm squatting, for example, if I find something's tight, I'll do a set of squats, then I'll find out what's tight, so factoring in my individual differences as well as my current condition, and work on that in between my warm-up sets. Another thing we can look at is doing a specific exercise as a technique primer or a movement primer, fitting into a major or compound exercise. We should factor in though our current session. So we should look at what exercises we're doing across the session. If we're going to squat, bench and deadlift in the session in that order, we'll do a general warm-up first, then look at doing a very specific squat warm-up just prior to squatting. If we're going to squat, we'll then do our squatting work sets, then move on to bench press. Again, we'll do a specific bench press warm-up, growing in intensity, do a bench press work sets. Then we go on to deadlifts. We're using similar joints from squatting and bench pressing with deadlifting, but we're still going to prepare the movement. So we'll then do a specific deadlift warm-up, which might just be 2 or 3 warm-up sets. Power exercises have a very high technical demand to them. Things like snatches, cleans, jerks. Now some specific warm-ups might include other exercises or complexes in addition. For example, if we're snatching, we might do a snatch routine that includes things like snatch balance, overhead squats, snatches and snatch pulls, prior to hitting our actual work sets of snatching. But as we build towards our work sets, we're going to build in specificity though. So we're not going to keep doing overhead squats and other exercises in the complex just prior to our snatch. We might do them early on and get closer and closer to what we're going to do in our work sets and finish off the last few sets only doing snatches. I have some very different approaches to some of my clients with warm-ups. We take Mark, for example, Olympic weightlifter. He has a very specific warm-up that he does, and he knows that routine and it works for him. So we don't play or mess around with that. He works on his own mobility and flexibility, and he factors in what he needs to do on that day. So looking at his current condition to make sure he's prepared for the session. We also look at Mac, who's a golfer. He has some specific movements as technique primers, like goblet squatting at the start of his session. It's not going to be heavy on load. It's going to improve his mobility and range of motion to his sticking point or the points where he has a few issues with. And that's really improving his hip mobility as well as motor control. Now, the key takeaways from this Whiteboard Wednesday is warm-ups are important, and think of them as preparing your body for the training you're about to do. You shouldn't go in cold because that can lead to injuries or can lead to poor performance outcomes. So we want to make sure we're in the best condition we can be for that session. Our warm-up should be specific, that is going from generalized to very specific to the actual session we're about to do. It should consider our individual differences as well as our current condition. We should make sure it's efficient. We don't want to be wasting 30, 40, 50, 60 or more minutes in a warm-up if we're going to train for 30 minutes. You should think about doing what you need to do for that session. General rule of thumb, you can look at 10 to 20 minutes for your timeline for warm-ups. Anything more than that, you're probably wasting your time. To do something like foam rolling for 30 minutes prior to squatting, you've probably got some sort of underlying issue, or you might just be addicted to foam rolling.